Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the higher term time frame closes for Bitcoin that just came in with this July monthly open. Now today is July 1st, 2024, and we're going to start with looking at Bitcoin on the daily because we did see Bitcoin set a daily low. So if we zoom in here to the chart, you're going to see why I have this chart so zoomed out here pretty shortly for some of the longer term time frames. But on the daily, Bitcoin did set a technical daily low and solidified this structure, the structural downtrend that we currently have going on, because this is still a downtrend. But it set the swing low here and the closing low with Sunday's closure into Monday's open. So we did see that closure come in above the area that I specified last Friday, and that is the close above 62,500 would set a closing low, and then of course lock in that swing low down there, which is coming in at just below the March of 2021 monthly and quarterly closing high, and that is at around 58.8. And of course we did see the wick down on this current move down to 58,400 or so. So what does this mean? Setting a low here on the daily, does that really do anything at the moment? No. In fact, Bitcoin did also hit some of the upside targets that we talked about should it set a low. In Monday's candle here, as we do have the Tuesday open for the second, even though it's still the first for me today, the Monday candle did spike up into the higher side of this first higher low of the prior uptrend. So, we were looking for Bitcoin to hold this wick low of this first higher low of the prior uptrend at around 60,150 on a closing basis. Wicks below just fine, but we wanted to see this area closed above, and Bitcoin has successfully done that. The next area to the upside to look for was the top side of this higher low structure over here, somewhere around 63,500 to $63,000. We did see that area swung in yesterday's price action. In fact, almost hitting this lower high close open over here at $64,000, just above it. So, this is another area to pay attention to. This lower high at $64,000 to the overhead resistance here at 65 to that swing high at 65.5. This is going to be the next area that I'm going to point out in a little bit when I talk about some targets that we need to see broken above in terms of overhead resistance, some target areas that Bitcoin needs to regain. The Bitcoin bulls need to actually start getting some of these areas recovered pretty soon here before momentum starts to turn against them. But in the context of the daily, seeing a higher low structure on a close and a swing basis is going to be the next thing that we want to see, even if we don't see this downtrend break above this 67,274. So what would that mean? I mentioned this on Friday. We have the downtrend here, and unless Bitcoin blasts off and takes out 67,274 on a closing basis, it will remain a downtrend. So we're more than likely, from a statistical point of view and from a support and resistance point of view, we're more than likely going to see, another lower high. And, could that be yesterday's high coming in at 63,800 and then it comes down and makes some sort of a higher low or equal low? Well, maybe, or maybe Bitcoin could push up further, put in a lower high. Wherever that lower high comes in, maybe around 65, 66, 64, 65. What we need to see from there is higher low or equal low structure. So we don't want any closes below that 58,400, and preferably on a closing basis, we want to see Bitcoin hanging out above this 60,300 closing low structure here as well. And that would provide for the potential for Bitcoin to then come up and take out that lower high, thus breaking that downtrend at a more reasonable area. If Bitcoin were to extend all the way back up to 67,274 and take that out on a closing basis, it would have room to potentially put in a higher low or equal low as well. It just seems a little less likely. I'll get into that when I look at some of the lower term time frames, but it still is a possibility. So as it stands right now, Bitcoin has the low in on the daily and on the swing. What we need to see from here is either a lower high that gets taken out preferably with a higher low in place, kind of like what we saw in this downtrend here. We had another lower high, then higher low. We take out this lower high, we have our trend change. You know, but as it stands right now, 67,274 is the downtrend break. So, Bitcoin's getting a nice bounce. Still nothing to make of it just yet, but it's something to build on at least from here. And from the daily perspective, momentum is still pointed to the upside for a momentum indicator like a regular Stoke here, which is close over close momentum. The momentum pivot is going to be around $61,000 currently. We do see that we do have two lows that have populated here on RSI. It is above the moving average here. I do want to note where the edge of the bearish control zone is as well. That is actually coming in around the daily pivot. It's currently at 60,800 to 61K, give or take a couple $100 there by the edge of the bearish control zone. So as long as Bitcoin is trading and closing candles above there, I would look at momentum as still being angled up on the daily. Now, we also do have, this is the lower low on price action, but we saw lower lows on RSI here. So there's multiple drives of hidden bullish divergence in this case, which, in the context of not seeing any regular bullish divergence populating on this current move down for RSI, hidden bullish divergence can really only be seen as, a bit of provides for a bit of a pop up or a bounce in this case. And that is exactly what we are seeing. Now, let's get into some of the higher term time frame closures. It is very important to see where some of this came in. We are going to throw on the Bollinger Bands to see where things are lining up with support and resistance as well. So let's go ahead and throw on the Landy Bands indicator. Again, you can find this for free in the link in the video description for YouTube or my profile there. It is linked on X as well. All you got to do is add the indicator to your favorites, and then you can find it. It is not searchable in the indicator section just yet, as I'm still working on some other things that I'd like to add to the indicator before it's publicly released. But it's free, and it will always remain free, so you can grab it from those links that I just described. Now, Bitcoin is in a compression on the weekly. We've been talking about this for a little while now. Nice big expansion up. Compression on the weekly. This is a bullish compression as it stands right now. Bitcoin also has the opportunity to set this area as a swing low. This wick right into that March monthly and quarterly closing high area. That could become a higher low on a swing. Now, the only way to set that as a swing would be there's two ways to look at this. If we do see a weekly closure above 63,350, then that sets this as a swing low. In order to see it then progress from a swing low to a closing low, we need to see Bitcoin come up and take out 66,630 on a close. Then we would have a swing low and a closing low on the weekly, and that would be another higher low. So that, we currently have this higher high, higher higher low, lower high, and then this would be a higher low if that did occur in that manner, or play out in that manner, I should say. And then, what is that indicative of? Well, it's indicative of exactly what the Bollinger Bands are showing us here, and that is a compression, an accumulation period, or, just sideways price action on the weekly here. Is what you'll hear many equate it to. But it's a compression on price action right now. It's an accumulation, not a reaccumulation. A reaccumulation would be on any closes below the lower second standard deviation now that take out the wick low here at 56,500. That is where I would start to entertain moves down to the lower third standard deviation on expansion on the weekly time frame into $53,000 and possibly below to these weeklies here somewhere around $50,000. And well, we're going to see in just a moment on some of the longer term time frames, if things did get really bad to the downside, we could potentially see a reaccumulation all the way back to this monthly area from the August of 2021 and March of 2022 monthly closing zones at around 47,000 to 45.5. Now, you might be a little surprised by that number, but I want to bring up something fundamental because, and I got to credit Eric Crown from Eric Crown's Crypto, formerly Crown's Crypto Cave, which, I really wish that he would have kept that. But hey, I'm just an old school kind of guy in that regard. But he brought up that Caprioli's indicator had updated on his website before, and this is the Bitcoin production cost. And I believe he might have included it in a video. I'm not really sure, but I know that he mentioned it somewhere. that the indicator had updated on Caprioli's site has not yet updated for the Bitcoin production cost indicator here in TradingView. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, because we did have, and I mentioned this last week, that the floor cost for electricity was coming down because we have gotten quite a few adjustments or difficulty adjustments down. As you know, post halving is pretty typical. You know, network kind of calms down, price goes sideways, people get disinterested in, you know, really moving things around. You know, we did have the runes pop and the ordinal stuff that was kind of buoying the hash rate difficulty there for a while because blocks were being filled. In this case, you know, they're not getting quite as full. You can even see we're getting 8, 9, 7 sat blocks coming in, you know, and it has gotten even lower at some points over this past weekend. So this is Caprioli.com and the charts section here, /charts. You can see the Bitcoin production cost. Its last update was June 30th. So the electrical cost has come down to $47,000. And why do I bring that up? Well, I bring that up because, you know, well, we can take a look at this for just a moment. You know, it did pop up to our previous number that we had talked about. The electrical cost was hanging around, you know, $66,000 to $64,000, and then it started to drop with those difficulty adjustments and is now sitting at around $47,000 with another drop projected to around $45,000. Now, I've mentioned this quite a few times before, and you can even see it on this chart here where, you know, there is, I can't really zoom in, but you can see Bitcoin trading at the electrical cost here in 2016, just riding the electrical cost line back up after riding it down and then back up. And you can see that, you know, in bear market bottoms, we've seen it get very close. And then in the big sell-off in 2020, where it spiked to electrical cost zone, traded below for an ever so slight period of time as difficulty adjusted down here. Price did drop, but did not actually hit the difficulty adjustment there back in 2020 as well. So, you know, it's just post halving. And then, of course, bear market on the wicks, it hit it here. And then on the closes, it actually hit it over here on the actual bear market bottom here. This is taking the closes, and it's a little bit more modified. It was at $15,000 and $14,000 on his chart here. The indicator, you know, it's taking an aggregate, but for like Coinbase, it was below production cost, that kind of thing. So the potential for Bitcoin post halving to come down and test that production cost area is not out of the ordinary at all. And you can see that it kind of already did that here. So it's not a guarantee that Bitcoin has to come down and test it, because you can see back here in 2020, the miner price did come down, and price actually did come down to the production cost there. You see the gray line got below production cost just post halving here as well. And then before production cost actually drops as the difficulty adjustments adjust for that hash rate difficulty down on the network as blocks are not being quite as filled and demand comes down on the network. So I wanted to point that out at that 47.7, because if Bitcoin by chance did fail this area, right, let's say it starts to close below the lower first at 61,350 on the weekly, takes out this low of last week, takes out the lower low at 56,500, and starts to get below that lower second standard deviation, push down through the 53 and 50 and start getting expansion on the weekly, that this is the likely target area, somewhere around $47,000 to $45,000, because that is now the updated floor for the electrical cost for Bitcoin. That is not the miner cost, mind you. Miner cost is still at $66,000, just like the indicator that I've shown you in the past. Or actually, it updated today to $64,000 is actually the miner cost for today. His price is trading around that $62,754. We can see that the miner price and then the actual total production cost is around 66. So, you know, that's essentially what we've been looking at on the TradingView indicator as well. So I did want to call that out, because if Bitcoin were to, and this is not my personal opinion right now, this is from a technical analyst point of view, if we were to see a breakdown on expansion into these downside support areas, the most likely area that it's going to head to below $50,000, those weeklies that I've called out many times, would be looking for some sort of a reaccumulation around, you know, the floor of the electrical production cost, right around a key area that's in a big monthly zone. Now, Is that my first take on what's happening for price action here? No, absolutely not. In fact, this is a bullish compression as it stands right now. But the criteria must be understood that if we see a breakdown below the current low side structure and it takes out that wick low, we're going into a long form reaccumulation. I do not believe that it is a bear market start. That would be a reaccumulation. I believe that would lead to much higher prices than you're going to hear me project if this were to just accumulate here and then head up. So, for if you're really looking for the most bullish upside scenario, however short-lived that might be, or a prolonged bull market that lasts for a lot longer than many people would think, you'd actually want to see that reaccumulation occur. Everybody to call it a bear market. Bitcoin kind of goes sideways and silent in a reaccumulation for a period of months, maybe through the end of the year, and then absolutely melts faces coming into 2025 into 2026. Whereas as it currently stands, we're probably looking at bull market topping at the end of this year into the first quarter of next year. Now, that's a conversation that I'm going to have as we go on throughout this quarter into the fourth quarter. So Q3, we'll continue with this conversation as price action develops. But in this case, you could see back above the basis on the weekly would also put Bitcoin above this overhead resistance at around $65,000. The basis is roughly right there. So back above around 65 to 65.5. Bitcoin, I'm looking, heading for it to head back up to around $69,000 at the prior cycle all-time high. And then as soon as Bitcoin starts to break out above on a closing basis, this area at around 69,500. I'm looking for, 70 to 72 by this lower high structure back to the all-time high here. You can see the upper second standard deviation is right there at the all-time high at 73,835. Any closes above there, and I'm looking to the, $75,000, $76,000 range. You can see the upper third standard deviation is around 77 to 78. So I would take it 73 to 75 and then 75 to 78 by the upper third. We start seeing closures above there on expansion. That wouldn't be abnormal, by the way. Then I would be looking for 75, 78, 78 to 80, then mid to low 80s from there. And then we come back to it for probably, a little bit of reaccumulation on the daily at minimum before a move up to higher prices, likely targeting, $90,000 to $100,000 and higher. Looks good as it stands right now, but it's still pressured down on the weekly. So we need to see Bitcoin holding this area and starting to turn things around. 68,650 is the momentum pivot for the weekly. Now, RSI isn't inspiring me right now, but it's also not anything too crazy. There is a little bit of bearish divergence that's already pretty much played out within this range, especially with the swing low. If the swing low gets confirmed, then I would be looking for eventual closes above 66,630 to solidify the closing low on the weekly, and then come back to it from there for those further upside targets that could even occur midweek. Now, the longer term timeframes, like the monthly, are going to be big. Now you see that we're going to take off support and resistance for a moment here and talk about this monthly, because this is something that I've talked about many times over. Used to talk about this. We were talking about this all through the other cycles. If you knew me then, and then from the expansion phase, one of the things that I pointed out when Bitcoin started to actually kick off expansion back here in December of 23. We were like, hey, this is now the expansion phase. We're just looking for this high to get taken out at that $47,000, almost 48,500 here. 45,500 to $47,000 was kind of the big area, and then take out that wick high at 48,500 or so to actually move on with the rest of the move to the highs. But that expansion phase, I've mentioned this over and over again. Not really going to go through it here, but the idea is that during the expansion phase, Bitcoin will typically come down on the monthly and test into the upper first. And I mentioned this on Friday, maybe last Monday it might have been, that I was looking for the upper first to now enter the bottom side of the range. And it got a nice move up to around 57,200. So it's now above that 56,500 wick low. And, I wouldn't want to see Bitcoin testing back down here towards the end of the month when it gets dangerous for a close under the upper first. But, in between now and the end of the month, it's safe to test that area as long as it's not breaking down and fulfilling some of the weekly criteria for downside. We're kind of in a volatility range between 57,200 in the upper first and the upper second, which is now at the all-time high, just slightly above it there at $74,000, but 73,835, 74 is pretty much fair game. And any closures above, and we're looking, eventually for Bitcoin to work its way up to the upper third, possibly even start closing outside of it like it usually does during its bull market expansion phases. That's now at 91,240. So looks pretty good. The basis band of the Bollinger Bands on the monthly now is coming in at $40,000, working its way up past some of those swings down there at 38.5, which is a big monthly area. 38.5, by the way, is this close open right here that got spiked into on this candle back here in January. It was nearly a perfect daily tag of this monthly close open. This was the higher low that was averted by the bears that slammed things down during Luna and then subsequently FTX. So, that was the key area. We had the potential for a higher low on the monthly, and that's what many were looking for. And the criteria was not met after it rejected around that 48, 240, 48.5 area, because it didn't actually close the low. It closed and set a swing low, but never closed on a monthly low. So the same thing is going to be in play here for this monthly. What do we need to see for Bitcoin to move on? Well, even though it can play in the volatility range, in my opinion, safely between the upper first and upper second, around that 57,200, possibly even swings the low, but I wouldn't want to see it enter in that kind of a danger zone, to be quite honest with you, on those lower term timeframes. But basically between 57 to around 74, it can play in that range. We need to see closures now above the close open monthly highs here. So we need to see closes on the monthly above 71,300. That would actually, and possibly you got to take out that wick high. So $72,000 is kind of what I would say. Got to take out the wick high. Then we'll have a technical closing low in that I would feel comfortable with to then go and test those highs and higher and really start getting on with this run. The monthly is turned down on the Stochastic momentum indicator here. And yes, when it is turned down, that is a danger sign. But I do believe that we're playing out what I would refer to as like a mimic of the 2019 cycle, just much higher in the Stoch range. Because we did have a volatility reset. I've covered this in videos past, but we have had a volatility normalization. So this is, to me, like what we saw in 2019. I'd be looking for a bullish reset and then get on with the rest of the run. This could come down further as long as Bitcoin is holding its current structure lows. I would not be concerned. 68,554 is going to be the momentum pivot on the monthly. So, closes back above to solidify a monthly low would also turn that back up in a bullish fashion. Not seeing any dire signals here either. There's no high end just yet. Only on closes below. Now 60,621 would be that. Would paint a technical high, but you would still need to see the wick low of 56,500 breakdown. But I'm not really looking for that, to be quite honest. Not yet. We'll see how the rest of this month progresses. Now, the 2 month, when evaluating the 2 month, we can see that it is rejecting this is where I'm a lot more longer cycle than most. This was a big run up to reaccumulation, even though bear market, but on the longer term timeframes, this was this is a big reaccumulation pattern, or accumulation pattern, if you like. Reaccumulation during the monthly time frame to higher term time frame accumulation, in my opinion. Closes above the upper first are fine. That's 54,700. That still provides, from a volatility standpoint, the opportunity for Bitcoin to swing down below. But again, you don't want to see closes below 56,500 on those lower term timeframes. The upper second is governing the top side on a wick basis, right around the prior 2-month highs. So we haven't really seen, any kind of closure above $69,000 on these major timeframes that, like the 2-month that needs to be seen for a breakout. And in this case, from the 2-month perspective, that would also be a close above the upper second, which would initiate expansion. We are starting to see the etchings of it kicking off here on the Bollinger Bands, but it's not yet baked in. We need to see a close above that upper second at minimum at $70,430, but we need to see closes above $69,000 and above the upper second that then can go and take out the current wick highs. That only gives us the range up to the current all-time high, and then we got to look for higher on a closing basis. So if it does close the next 2-month candle above there, we could target the upper third, mid $80,000 region, likely to be first pass rejection around mid 80s. But then I would be looking for closures outside of that upper third, getting in towards the 90 to 100,000 and possibly beyond to, 110, 115, 115, 125, so on and so forth from there, depending on the structure that starts to build out of this current zone. 2-month is still angled to the upside in terms of momentum, 33,200. So got quite a wide momentum range there. It's fine. Quarterly, you can see that quarterly is still in a compression phase. And this is where I'm actually going to bring up the longer chart here. And this is the index. Now, Bitcoin, starts out very, very volatile, and you see the compression and then the expansion, compression, and then the expansion. We have not yet started the real expansion. So understand that the bull run has still yet to come. That is something that's very important to understand. Now, we do have a quarterly close open above the prior quarterly close open, and this was the quarterly close open at 58, the quarterly high close open here at 58,793. So your 58.8 that I've talked about. We've seen a close come in above there already on the quarterly and the prior cycle wick high. This was the lower high in the quarterly, which is coming in at that $47,000 or so, $46,000 to $47,000. The upper first is above that lower high. I like that. $53,000. Again, that's that weekly area on the daily that I pointed out that Bitcoin retested back in January before moving on to new all-time highs. We have the upper second standard deviation is now the main nemesis overhead at 72,500. Above there, we're looking for the upper third somewhere around that mid 80s to $90,000 region and beyond into the $100,000 region eventually upon expansion, which again, we have not yet seen. So understand that we are in unique times at this particular moment when it comes to this stuff. 38,683 is going to be the momentum pivot. I don't see Bitcoin closing under that quarterly by any remote fashion, although weirder things have happened over time. I'm not too concerned about that particular pivot number right now, considering Bitcoin is trading, well above it. So that is to say, 2-month and quarterly look fine. Monthly is pressure down, but all within the context of an accumulation period post halving, which is normal. All of the things that can be said about this being pretty bearish, even on the weekly. It's really looking to me like if Bitcoin can pull through and keep this range held, its next leg is going to come fairly soon. Now, when I say fairly soon, I'm talking fairly soon in the context of these longer term timeframes. That does not mean that Bitcoin is, destined to take off tomorrow, although it could. So understand kind of when looking at longer term timeframes, it takes a while to play out. Could even take the rest of this month and the rest of the summer, that kind of thing. But for now, we defer to the daily as those higher term timeframes do look pretty damn good. I guess something I probably should point out is the 6-month, because we did get a 6-month close open and it does not have a lot of data. So this is important to understand. Bitcoin does not have a lot of data on the 6-month. I mean, we're on the index right now, and it's only just now populated that the actual Bollinger Band set. it is probably pretty important to note that we have that upper first at $40,000. This mirrors which one? Not the it's the 2 month basis band. So 2 month and 6 month, kind of mirroring each other in terms of important moving averages and standard deviations away from them in a specific area. This is kicking off what would be considered expansive phase above the upper second standard deviation on the 6 month, but there's just not a lot of data. But hanging out above the upper second on a 6 month is nothing to sneeze at, and that's coming in at 59.9, so basically $60,000. We see that $80,000 is the upper third. We've already tested the upper third on the 6 month chart in the first 6 month candle of this year. So one of the big things that I've noted before that might be of interest to you is this is like the first big real bullish continuation that we've seen ever populate on the 6 month chart. And if we look at volatility, this is the interesting one here. If we look at volatility, did it cross over just yet? No, it hasn't done it. So we got to wait till the end of this year. So what we're looking for is the very first volatility crossover the moving average in Bitcoin's history on the 6 month chart, which is indicative of, this being in an overall sideways and up accumulation in terms of the volatility perspective. So we haven't actually seen this tick up. I was hoping it would, but if Bitcoin was trading at the top side of the range, it might have started to kick off its very first expansion of its history. Now, that doesn't give us a lot of data, but when looking at expansion phases in terms of volatility expansion, we haven't seen a normalization of volatility expansion. So we high volatility, and then the volatility decreases over time, and more of a consolidation structure in terms of the actual volatility metrics. The only place that we've seen the actual volatility normalization is here on the 2 month, where we had the consolidation period or the low volatility period actually double bottom. That's the first normalization. Instead, we've had these lower highs in volatility the entire way through, and the first double bottom normalization period has just occurred with the 2 month chart. As it relates to like the monthly, where we've seen volatility normalize, through the actual bull market. And then we saw expansion. So we saw a compression to expansion into the bear market. And then we saw compression into expansion for this bull run back to the prior cycle high. So this is where we've seen normalized volatility metrics. And that's, only just started to occur on the 2 month. And it's going to start populating over the next, year, the next half year into next year as a full year, I suspect. Probably even, it might even take like 2 years for this chart to normalize, maybe even 4, because it's got to come up and then come back down. Or if it double bottoms and like Bitcoin goes into like a sideways consolidation or reaccumulation, you might even see this go sideways. Oh boy, that's juicy for bulls long term, man. But yeah, the daily's where things are at. This is kind of where I'm going to leave things, I think, for today. Is a chart that I've shown, that I showed last week and then posted to the X feed and then in various Discords. And that is not going to be on this chart. It's going to be on the actual Coinbase chart. Let's go ahead and go to the range lows chart. And we'll go down to the criteria that I had mentioned, was Bitcoin below 61,250. Let's go ahead and take Bollinger Bands off here. This is just the hourly chart. We have the range low on a close, 58,265 to that 56,500. Bitcoin's moved down. We had the daily areas to pay attention to, which was 59,270 on the close for the actual low. And then we needed to see Bitcoin basically closing above 61,250, after spiking 61.5 up here, or 62.5 rather, where it got the 2 days up to 62.5 to set the actual daily low. When looking at the actual daily chart, we needed to see Bitcoin closing back above 62.5, and on those lower term timeframes, anything below 61,250. This chart actually worked out perfect. We saw the 62.5. It broke down below 61,250, came down into our first higher low of the prior uptrend. That is this higher low structure over here being highlighted. And, it came down and tested into that area and then messed around with, the 61,250, tested, 62.5 or so. Tried to hold the 61,250 again, dumped down below, and then reaccumulate in that area around that higher low, saving itself on a closing basis by not closing below that 60,150, regained 61,250, came up, broke this 62.5 area, and then went right to the next area, and that was the top side of the higher low structure of the prior uptrend that I had talked about around that, 63 and a half. You can see that that is currently where Bitcoin is playing right now. Above there, we're looking 64 to 65.5. Needs to reclaim that area to go test 66.5 to 67,274, which is the downtrend break as it currently stands right now, unless we see a daily a daily lower high before there. So this chart has played out very nicely. And something that I'll probably continue to refer to in those particular groups on Discord. So, that's going to do it for today. I want to make mention of the hosting that I've been doing for various Spaces events here on X. I really do appreciate those who have allowed me to be a member of their community and host those spaces with them. And, I do want to let you know that there's going to be more. It's going to be a weekly thing. So I believe this Wednesday, there's going to be a Spaces with myself co-hosting with the Pepe Ordinals Maxi developers. And then I believe with the founder of NatMonkey as well on Friday, if he's still wants to do that one. We got to nail down times and stuff to see if we can actually get them. I know that he wants to do them as well. And then, of course, NBO, where I'm a team member over there as well. Likely going to occur again on Saturday. But we'll nail those particular times down. We'll notify you in the Discords. Look on the Twitter or X posts, as I will repost those to set reminders. And there might even be a few more here and there. So keep an eye on the X profile. If you're not following me, please go ahead and follow me. Turn alerts on, because I primarily only post about the projects that I'm involved with, new Bitcoin order, extra ordinals, Pepe Ordinals Maxis, Nat Monkeys, which I'm not necessarily involved in the project, but helping to co-host some Spaces events over there. And there's going to be some others as well coming up here shortly. So keep track of that, and you get some technical analysis and some cool insight and interviews with devs and teams, and it's just a fun time. So if you get bored with the price action in the market, come hang with us. Usually we like to bring people up to ask questions and stuff as well. So I look forward to seeing everyone in those Spaces events. And I do really appreciate all the feedback I'm getting for the technical analysis stuff. I want to leave you with that. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. And with all of that said, Landy out. Take care. Where's the button? There it is.